The Green Party was founded by Christopher Fetz in 1981 and was first known as the Ecology Party of Ireland, before changing its name to the Green Alliance in 1983 and then to the Green Party in 1987. The Green Party operates in both the north and south of the island. While pertaining to the four pillars of green politics, the Green Party would be considered a centre-left to left-wing party. The Green Party in recent years has had a large fluctuation of results with the electorate, with them losing all 6 of their Dáil Éireann seats in 2011 following their coalition with Fianna Fáil in 2007, to them now having a total of 12 seats in Dáil Éireann, 2 seats in Seanad Éireann, 2 seats in the Northern Irish Assembly, 2 seats in European Parliament and a total of 57 seats at local government level throughout the island of Ireland. I sat down with a member of both the Green Party and the Young Greens, Evan Periera, to ask why he got involved in politics and decided to join the Green Party. Thanks a million for sitting down with me anyways, Evan. First question for yourself in regards to politics. What initially sparked your interest in politics?
It was back in 2015. I remember I was still in primary school at the time, but I went to my local youth cafe and they were actually giving out these pins, if you can see up there, belong to, yes, parents and young people for marriage equality. I remember I took one and I brought it home and I kind of like looked it up and I was like, that makes sense. Like, you know, 2 men or 2 women that love each other, why shouldn't they be able to get married? And this was kind of before I realized I was bisexual, so that was kind of what got me interested originally. And I've always had an interest in history as well, and issues like World War II and Cold War. So kind of looking back on where we've come from and trying not to repeat the mistakes of yesterday. So that's kind of what sparked my interest in politics. And my grandmother and my mother also kind of encouraged it. They're left-wing themselves, and I'd consider myself left-wing as well. And my ma explained the marriage equality referendum to me, and it just made sense. And from there, I think she kind of regrets it now, seeing my interest in politics. But yeah, that's just a few reasons I got interested in politics.
Yeah, and so obviously you're a member of the Young Greens now. What initially sparked your interest not only in them, but then to make the jump to join them?
Well, it was during the European elections. I was actually a member of Young Fine Gael at the time, and I was growing disillusioned, to be honest. And then it was seeing people like Saoirse McHugh, who was running in my constituency of Midlands North West, and people like Grace O'Sullivan. I remember I was at the Irish Economic Students' Union Annual Assembly, and Grace O'Sullivan was speaking there, and I was just taken away. I was like, she's amazing. And then seeing Saoirse McHugh at that debate and her really taking down Peter Casey, I was like, they seem like a good party. And reading more into the party and then into green politics as a whole, I let my Young Fine Gael membership lapse, and after this would have been about a week after the local and European elections, I joined the Young Greens. Like, green politics as a philosophy as well, I've always kind of believed in. I was raised to be an environmentalist. My dad would bring me out on litter picks around the estate. I remember when I was little, I'd have the high vis and the litter picker and all. And, I've always had an interest in recycling and all. So I'd say I was naturally geared to green politics, and just the record of the Green Party as well, in and out of government, we fought for civil partnerships and we got those in, and really if it wasn't for civil partnerships in the old coalition, I don't think marriage equality would have been achieved in 2015. Civil partnerships was really a stepping stone to that. We doubled Ireland's renewable energy capacity, we brought in the Leap Card scheme, we brought in Cycle to Work, we initiated the process to bring in gender quotas for national elections. So the Green Party has been there as a progressive voice in Irish politics, and I know we're not as well established like other parties like Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin or Labour, but I think that the Irish people are kind of, taking more of concern of the environment, but also, with the Labour Party kind of going down in popularity, looking for a new progressive party. And that's where I see the Green Party, a progressive left of centre party that I agree with. So that's why I joined.
Yeah, so you talked a bit about how you initially got interested in politics due to the marriage equality referendum, and then again why you joined the Greens. So what aspect now in politics is really keeping you involved, not only with the Greens but in politics in general?
Well, kind of encouraging young people to get involved in politics, and issues like Vote at 16 I have an immense interest in, and civic participation in general. How do we get people interested in politics? How do we get them engaged to ensure that our society is as democratic as possible? So that's why I've been involved with like the climate strikes and all, encouraging young people to have their say, do as much as possible to have their voice heard, because it's unfortunate, I'm in that age bracket 16 to 17 where a lot of us are politically engaged, but voting age I don't see it getting reduced anytime soon, unfortunately. It doesn't seem to be a priority for the two traditionally major parties, which it's unfortunate because they have a lot of engaged young people that I think would like to see a reduction in voting age. So that's really one issue that has kept me engaged in youth politics. But that, it's just part of the whole grand scheme of things, more democratic engagement, young people having their say, and how society can be more representative of people. Like, I'm from Kildare, we're the third youngest county in the country, and yet only one councillor out of 40 is below the age of 24. That's what we need to change. We need to ensure that politics is more representative of people and that young people have their say in how things are run.
So you talked a bit about how you were inspired by people in the Green Party such as Saoirse McHugh. Speaking on just politicians, not just in your own party, but in parties in general, do you think they're beginning to listen to young people more, and if so, on what topics in particular?
I think politicians, are listening to young people more. I've been involved in both Corla and Og and the Irish Second Level Students' Union, and there has been some good engagement with politicians. I know with Corla there's great communication really with local councillors a lot of the time. Some other callers mightn't have as good communication, if you get what I mean, but I think as Ireland's becoming more of a liberal society, we've really progressed in the last 20 odd years. I think politicians are taking the concerns of young people more seriously. I do think that we could do better, obviously. I think that's again where the reduction of voting age would come in. I'd say if we reduce the age of, if we reduce the voting age to 16, issues like education, funding for youth services, and then the issues that young people consider important, social issues, climate change, I think politicians would take an even greater concern of that, because then young people would actually have a say on whether or not they get back in office. Because it's all well and good for a politician to say, oh, I respect your voice, but if you can't vote them in or out of office, then really, and I know this sounds cynical, they don't have a reason to listen to you until you can really, affect whether or not they keep their position. So I think that politicians have been listening to young people a lot more. I do think, though, that some of them do use young people as token props. I remember the first climate strike back in March of last year on Kildare Street. There were politicians going there just, recording themselves with young people and all, kind of using them as props for their little videos on their social media. So we could do better, but we've definitely progressed in how young people and politicians communicate. And seeing more young people get involved in politics as well, I think is changing the political dynamic.
Yeah. So obviously we've seen massive youth turnout for like the past two major referendums, both marriage equality and the 8th Amendment. Do you think that there's another sort of issue that's going to come to the forefront? And I know yourself being a Green, I think I might know your answer, but is there anything that you think will unite young people again to campaign for something bigger that just doesn't involve party?
I definitely think so. Well, if you're guessing my answer was the climate strikes, that's one of them. I think that people have been taking more of a concern of the environment, especially young people, and talking to friends I have in Young Fine Gael and Odhrán Fianna Fáil and various left-wing political youth wings, I'm seeing a common trend of people, showing concern about the environment. People do have a different way of going about it, though. I would be more of the viewpoint of, maybe let's not impose carbon taxes on individuals, let's focus on corporations, and all others might be more geared to the likes of the carbon tax. But those are differences I think that people are putting aside with the overall goal of real action on the environment in the future for our children and their children. But also another issue I think that will unite people is the issue of direct provision. It's an issue that will go down in Irish history as bad as the Magdalen laundries, in my opinion. Ireland sent people, well, how do I say it? Irish people went around the world seeking refuge during the famine and when the Irish were in poverty. And I think that we owe it to the world to take in people who are seeking safety from poverty, from war. But the direct provision system, you saw Leo Varadkar in the Dáil saying, oh, it's free accommodation, free housing, free food, free heating, and at least we're not shooting people. If the bar is that we're not shooting people, then the bar is fairly low. And I think that people are, really seeing it as a humanitarian human rights issue. It's been condemned by international organizations, and it's really a stain on Ireland's human rights record, especially when we're becoming more of a progressive society. So I think that'll be an issue that will unite young people on both, it's really uniting the left in a lot of ways, PVP, Labour, Soc Dems and Greens. I don't think I've ever heard anyone on the left say that they're in favour of direct provision, but then talking to people in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, a lot of them are against direct provision and think that should be replaced with a non-profit system that cares for people as opposed to lining the pockets of wealthy business people that own these hotels. So climate change and direct provision, those two issues I see young people being united on.
Yeah, brilliant. Just obviously you're quite young yourself and there's a long way to go in the realm of politics, but where would you see yourself maybe in the future of not just youth politics, but politics in general going?
Well, look, I'm going to be going to university in a year. I definitely will get involved in student union politics. I'm actually looking at applying to DCU as my number one choice on my CAO, but I'm also looking at the University of Amsterdam. But if I don't get that, DC would be my destination, and definitely will get involved in student union. If I do go to a university in Ireland, if I go somewhere with our Young Greens branch, hopefully start one there. Mm-hmm. I think one day I will stand for election. There's local elections in 4 years, and my area, I'm in Afai in South Kildare, and the Green Party haven't run in my area since 2004 in the local elections. It's not a very green area. You wouldn't consider the Green Party to be a strong force there. And it's unfortunate because I see a lot of opportunity and, talk about sustainable development, creating new green jobs and all. So I see myself hopefully maybe even running in the local elections next time around. I'd be going on 21 at the next locals. So, definitely give it a try. And from there, who knows?
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm young. I have a lot of time.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's something I've always kind of tried to mention to people as well, as one of the reasons for starting up this series was because I think there is a big gap, especially in local election politics for young people. I know especially in my own area, there's no one below the age of 30 who's in the local council. So how are they meant to represent an area, specifically in Dublin, which houses a large majority of the youth population of Ireland? So no,
I think Hull is one of the youngest counties. I heard.
Yeah. One of the youngest and most diverse, but yeah, we have some of the least diverse and oldest councillors, I think, as well. But that's nothing on them as well. Obviously, they're running for a party that's established and they've been established, but it would be nice to get some more younger voices out there. You mentioned earlier on that you were also a member of YFG at one stage as well, and I'm not going to hold on it too long because obviously your views have changed. But I think it's an important note to touch on as well, is that whenever I talk to young people, they're a bit concerned about getting into politics because obviously the age bracket for young parties is 15 and up, and it's easy for myself to say, because I only got involved 2 years ago. I was at the age of 18, so it'd be easier for someone to say, well, I don't know if I'd be in the same party when I was 15 as opposed to when I'd be 20. So what would you say to people who are maybe a bit weary about jumping into party politics because they might be worried that their opinion is going to drastically change?
Well, it's a valid thought for people to have. Look, if I could go back in time, whether or not I would have joined Young Fine Gael, most likely not. It was definitely a learning curve. It was an experience, to say the least. I've always been on the progressive centre left, and it was local politics was one reason I got involved, and considering the Green Party wasn't in my area, that's why I joined Young Fine Gael. But that's water under the bridge now. That was just over a year ago. So yeah, people who might be worried about getting involved in youth politics, mightn't want to join a party. You can still be involved in politics. You don't have to be a member of a party. You can get involved with different organizations, different groups, and it's perfectly fine to like your doubts, like whether or not I'd be in the same party, because there's two things: either your views change or your party's views change, and those are things we can't account for in the future. So there's no rush to get involved in political parties, in my opinion. There's a lot of meaningful change you can make outside of parties. We've seen that, like the climate strikes. I know I keep referencing them, but a lot of those politically minded young people and members of political parties, they, you know what I mean? You don't have to be partisan about your politics either, but it does help sometimes. No rush to get involved in a political party youth wing. I'd encourage it, because honestly, it's great to have that network of young people with a common goal and a common cause. But if you have hesitations, no rush, to be honest. Just read into the parties, stay true to your principles and go from there. Support people you align with and fight the good fight.
So obviously, the big three parties in regards to both senior and youth politics would be considered to be Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And obviously there's more periphery parties that are now starting either to establish youth parties, or their youth parties are seeing a lot more growth in recent time. Do you find it's difficult to appeal to younger voices in those regards, to kind of bring them into these periphery parties such as the Greens, Soc Dems, Labour, or are you finding that people are really yearning for this different approach to politics because they feel they'll be more heard in smaller parties?
I think it's both. Definitely Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin, with their respective youth wings, do have the advantage. They have bigger profiles, and having elected representatives in almost every constituency around the country for all those parties is an advantage. I think for the smaller parties, Soc Dems, Labour, Greens, PPP, it is harder. Though for others, I think the likes of the Young Greens would have an advantage. We did really see an uptake in membership recently at Freshers in 2019. We've really just started up in some places, and we've grown from there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's due in part to the likes of the Green Wave last year and the growing concern for the environment. So we would have that advantage there. I think, though, a lot of people do, how do I say this, aren't happy with the big three, of Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. If you ask me which one I like the most, I don't think I could, give you an answer that a majority of people would like. But I think a lot of people would agree with me on that, where people are looking for, a different voice. And I think smaller parties do represent that voice, true progressive ideals, be it with Labour, their philosophical view of, workers' rights and all. I'm not going to say whether or not they've still stayed aligned to that in recent years. The Soc Dems representing a sort of new form of progressive politics, where they've come from recently. The Greens being about ecology, sustainability. PPP, having a lot of, activism behind them. I think a lot of young people do appeal to that.
Fuck you, Deputy Stein.